Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to today's video. Today we are doing our June reading wrap up, and June was definitely a very interesting month for me. So just to get right into it, I did end up reading 14 books in June, which is actually the most I have read in a month for the entire year of 2025 so far. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I did do a 24-hour readathon this month for our genre breakdown for the month. So I actually found myself sort of being a little more adventurous this past month and reaching for books that are out of my regular range. So we did have a very wide variety this past month. Out of those 14 books, I read 4 fantasies, 3 romances, 4 literary fictions, 1 historical fiction, 1 sci-fi, and 1 mystery. And out of my June monthly TBR, I did read 5 out of 5. So another very successful month. Okay, so I was looking at my list of books that I read in June, and literally I think like 6 or 7 of them were books from Book of the Month. So I would just like to take a second to talk about Book of the Month, and I would also love to thank Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. You guys know I am literally the biggest Book of the Month fan. I have been subscribed to Book of the Month for probably like 2 years now, and I have literally never skipped a month. But if you don't know what Book of the Month is, they are a book subscription service where they will curate a list of like upcoming new releases. So every month you will get a list of, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 books that Book of the Month has selected, and then you pick the book you want from that list. So the books that I got for this month, what month are we in? For the month of July, you'll see as you continue to watch my wrap up this month, but in the month of June, I found myself really going towards character driven stories and picking those up versus my usual like more fantasy centered reads. And while Book of the Month does always offer like a pretty wide variety of genres in my experience, I feel like they've also helped me expand my horizons, find new authors that I love. They've also encouraged me to branch out into different genres that I normally wouldn't pick up, and it's just been a wonderful experience for me. So the 2 books that I picked for July, first one is called Maggie or a Man and a Woman Walk into a Bar by Katie Yee. The premise of this book sounds so interesting. It's kind of a play on the joke of like a blank and a blank walk into a bar. In this case, it's a man and a woman walk into a restaurant. The narrator, who I think is the wife in the relationship, finds out that her husband is actually having an affair with someone named Maggie. And because that isn't enough bad news, our narrator soon walks into an examination room only to find that she has breast cancer. So she, I don't know why, I don't know the reason yet, but maybe to either make light of a situation or I don't know, I guess I'll figure out, but she ends up naming the tumor Maggie. And then I think we go on this journey of grief, healing, self-discovery, reclaiming your life, and all of that. So definitely sounds like something that has currently been up my alley. And the second book I picked up is The View from Lake Como by Adriana Trigiani. This one follows Jess. She has recently gotten a divorce, and I think just to like get away from everything and try and heal in peace, she moves back to Lake Como, to where she grew up with her parents. So she moves back to her parents' house and just kind of, you know, settles back into this old routine. She's like kind of taking care of her parents in a way and just trying to get back to her roots and like learn more about where she came from, her ancestry, and all that. Also, while she's there, I think she discovers some skills that she has and also, you know, embarks on this self-discovery journey. So those are the 2 books that I picked, but something else that was an add-on in this month's selection really intrigued me. It's called The Compound by Ailing Raw, I think. I'm not sure how to say her name, but the premise of that one sounds so good. It's set on a desert island, and we have a group of people who go on that island only to find they are being live streamed 24/7 for this reality TV show. And I think in the blurb it says it's basically like Love Island meets Lord of the Flies, and it's a mystery thriller, and that just sounds so exciting. So I'm gonna be completely honest, I have added that to my next box, and that will be coming as well in my next Book of the Month shipment. So that was just another exciting pick that was on the Book of the Month July list. I just overall absolutely love Book of the Month. You guys have probably seen a good chunk of my reads and my books come from Book of the Month, so they've definitely helped curate and guide my reading journey. There are some really cool features, and I think they're just really thoughtful. Things like if you look at a monthly selection and you're like, I don't really resonate with any of these books and don't want to pick them up, you do always have the option to just skip that month, and then your credit moves over to the next month, and it's so easy, it's so smooth to use. And so I will always recommend Book of the Month forever. For the month of July, for a limited time only, you can actually use the code HOTDOG to get your first Book of the Month for $9.99. So thank you, Book of the Month. Let's get into our wrap up. So we'll start with the 4 fantasy/romantasies that I read. The first one, wow, this pile is very tall. The first fantasy I read was Heart of the Sun Warrior by Sue Lynn Tan. So this is the sequel to The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. This is a duology, and I would classify this as a YA romantasy. In the first book, we meet Xingyin, and she is indeed the daughter of the moon goddess. She starts out the book living in exile with her mother, and we quickly discover that her entire existence basically has been kept a secret from the celestial kingdom. But at the beginning of the story, Xingyin's power flares and she catches the attention of the celestial kingdom and the celestial empress. Because of that, she's actually forced to flee, and in a turn of events, she actually ends up living in the celestial kingdom very close to the royal family, and so she is in this situation where she has to stay on the down low, hope the celestial emperor and empress do not find out who she actually is, as she kind of comes into her own power and navigates trying to live her life and also trying to get redemption for her mother. We do have romance in this as well. We do have a love triangle situation, which I didn't love, but that is essentially the story of the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and this book is obviously just a follow-up of events. Like, you know, it's a direct continuation from the first book to finish the duology. So I was overall very mixed on this book. I didn't end up loving it, which was a little disappointing because I did enjoy the first book. What I will say is this world overall is absolutely wonderful. It is gorgeous. It is whimsical. One of my absolute favorite parts about this world is that our immortals, that is our like magical being of this world, our immortals basically like when they want to go somewhere, they travel by cloud. So they'll like jump on these clouds and then sort of like magic them to move around. So I'm just picturing all these people standing on these like little mini clouds, and that just feels so cute and whimsy, and I love that. So I do love the world that Su Lintan has created here. Another thing I'm really impressed at is how much plot Su Lintan crams into her books, but like in the best way. This was present in both The Daughter of the Moon Goddess and this one, Heart of the Sun Warrior. Her writing is very artistic. It has that like flourishy, flowery style where she describes everything in a lot of detail, and so her books have this wonderful vibe and atmosphere to them, but she also manages to stuff in a lot of plot into not that many words. Like her books are YA, and I feel like the word count is not very high, but she manages to fill in as much plot as she can. And I remember being, especially with the first book, I was really amazed at how intricate and complex the plot actually was, as well as the like fantasy politics. However, things that I didn't love. So first of all, I did mention there is a love triangle. I was really hot and cold about the love triangle in the first book. Like some moments I was like, okay, yeah, I'm living for this. I like it. And then other moments I was just getting really, really frustrated at all of the characters that were involved in this triangle. And I will say in the sequel, I had hoped that the love triangle issue had kind of gone away, but unfortunately that was not the case. The love triangle kind of got worse in this one, in my opinion, and so yeah, I did not feel the relief that I had hoped to. And the other thing about this book in particular, I didn't really feel this way about the first book, but in this one, I feel like as much as, you know, there was a lot going on in the plot, everything felt really disjointed. I think it's because in the first book, we had like a purpose to the story, one main purpose that we were following throughout the entire book, so everything felt connected. We had a unified goal, and at the end of the first book, I honestly think that I would have been happy just reading the first book as a standalone, because it's one of those books that just concludes itself. And I feel like because of that, in my opinion, there was no like real direction to this sequel. And so reading this felt like just going on a bunch of side quests that were like maybe connected, but didn't feel that way as I was reading them. Like we had these little tiny tasks and goals and challenges, but there was no overlying theme or challenge that we wanted to accomplish. And so I felt very disconnected from it. That also kind of resulted in this weird thing where there were a lot of things happening in this plot where I was like, oh, this should make me feel really emotional. Like this feels like a very significant, sad moment. And I didn't feel a thing, which is not something you want when reading, you know, events that happen like this. So overall, was not too happy with this one. I had hoped for a better finale to the duology, but I will still recommend the first book. It does read very YA, so if you don't really love something that reads a bit younger, you will likely not love these books, but I thought the first one was magical and fun. Kind of like a mixture of something like Once Upon a Broken Heart, but with more Asian folklore elements. I was not a big fan of the sequel, unfortunately. Next up is a book that everyone has been talking about, and I unfortunately did not love this one either. That is Silver Elite by Dani Francis. This is a spicy dystopian romantasy. Think of it like Divergent with more magic and then plus spice, or like think of a Fourth Wing without dragons. I would say this book very highly resembles Fourth Wing, but to me feels like a watered down version of Fourth Wing. Like, I enjoy Fourth Wing a lot more than this book, but in terms of the writing style, the formatting, the pacing, even like the overall plot of the story, it does feel very Fourth Wing-esque. So in this world, we have mods and primes. Everyone's a human, but we have primes who are regular schmegular humans with no powers, and we have mods who are people who have these clairvoyant abilities. So they maybe have telepathy, they can sort of mind speak to each other, some of them can read other people's minds, some of them can even control other people's minds. That's a little bit more rare, and some people can have multiple. Mods in this world are being hunted, however, because, you know, they're seen as very dangerous. So the primes rule this world and they don't want the mods around because obviously they are a big threat. And our main character, Ren, is a mod, of course. So she's been living her entire life in hiding when one day she makes a mistake. She gets caught and she, for whatever reason, actually, instead of being executed, gets taken into this elite training program to basically work towards being in the military, into a very high-ranked squad in the military called the Silver Elite. So now she's in this position where she really needs to hide her powers. She has to convince everyone that she's a prime and not a mod, but she's in an environment that is training everyone around her to become the ultimate mod hunters. And so we also get into this cat and mouse type of situation where we have, you know, the captain of the Silver Elite, and we have our girl Ren. Honestly, this book had potential. The world was interesting enough. I will also say the plot in this was fun. It was fast-paced. There was constantly something going on. I personally don't think there was a moment in this book that felt slow. To me, the plot just kept going and going and going, and that was wonderful and fun to read. What I didn't love about this book, though, there were quite a few things that I didn't love. First of all, the romance. I absolutely did not understand. It was one of those lust first romantic relationships, and I feel like it was so poorly done in this one, where we would have Ren just feeling all of these feelings, all of these like lusty, intimate thoughts in situations that she should absolutely not be feeling these lusty, intimate thoughts. And it absolutely just did not make sense to me whatsoever. We also absolutely do not get a slow burn in this book. And I feel like this has been sort of advertised as a slow burn, enemies to lovers story. It's not. It's a very, very fast burn. Nothing happens slow. But yeah, just the way the romance came together, it was very physical first. And the emotional side of the romance only came in at the end of the book. And at that point, it was kind of too late for me to get invested in it because of the way the romance developed. Very, very like lusty physical first. And I really, really don't like that in books. And I also will say the banter, like the style of banter in this romance was also not it for me. It was kind of like, for me, cringy. I'm sorry. Like, I just don't like this type of romance dialogue in particular. It's like, it's more in your face, more vulgar. It just felt very forced to me and not genuine. And then also just like as we went on, like as I said, the plot was fun, but I will say we started to reveal a lot of holes in the plot and in the world. Everything got really messy by the end, and I will say there were a lot of character inconsistencies where I didn't understand a lot of the things that our main characters were doing. But I don't know. Overall, it was an easy read. I will say that if you're new to romantasy, you might love this one. But for me, it just didn't hit. Ooh, I read Rose and Chains by Julie Soto. So I did receive an ARC for this book. It does come out in July though, so it does come out very, very soon. I was so curious to read this one because I do really like Julie Soto's writing. She has in the past been more of a romance writer. I know she's released, I think it's 2 romance books. I've read 2 from her at least. But this year she also released a thriller and she released this romantasy. So she seems to be kind of branching out into different genres, which I love when authors do that. This book in particular though is a Dramini fanfiction that has been rewritten, repurposed into a traditionally published book that is separate from the Harry Potter universe. And if you're curious, the fanfiction is called The Auction. It's one of the more popular ones, I think, although I have never personally read it. So I kind of went into this blind. Like, I did not know what The Auction was other than the fact that it was a very popular fanfic. But okay, the plot of this. We follow Bryony Rosewood, which does sound like Hermione, like Bryony, Hermione. I don't know, sounds kind of similar. But she is the princess of the Eversons, and their enemy people, they are called the Bomardi. At the beginning of this book, Bryony's brother Rory dies, and this is very significant. This kind of parallels with the fanfiction, I think, because the fanfiction starts in an alternate Harry Potter universe where Harry actually dies at the Battle of Hogwarts. So at the beginning of this story starts at that point. Like, what if Harry died? Just a little bit of fanfic context there. But yeah, her brother dies, and this is a really big deal because her brother has been always prophesized to be victorious as the leader of their people, as the person who would finally defeat the Bomardi and like free their people and just be like a wonderful leader. He actually, you know, dies. So he clearly was not the one to actually fulfill the prophecy that everyone thought he was there to fill. So the entire world now gets taken over by the Bomardis, and all the Eversons get captured and get auctioned out to the higher up rich people of the Bomardi side. Bryony ends up being auctioned as a prisoner to the Hurst family, specifically to Tovin Hurst, who is the Draco Malfoy of this world. We kind of have this dual timeline where we dive into the past, into Bryony and Tovin's past relationship while they were in school. So while I was reading this, as I mentioned, have never read the fan fiction, but I couldn't stop seeing the similarities and the parallels with Harry Potter. There are differences made in the magic system, in the world. There are things added and tweaked in the magic system, I would say, but overall, I kept like seeing a character pop up and I was like, oh, like, you're Ron. I don't know if it's just because it was in my head that this is based off of a fan fiction, but I just kept seeing too many similarities, and like overall, I couldn't get over that emotionally, so it was hard for me to like fully immerse myself into this world because I kept seeing Harry Potter and Hermione and Draco in my head. But that being said, there was a lot of like world building that had to be done in this book to differentiate itself from Harry Potter, and I feel like because of the pacing of the story and the structure and the fact that we start at the end of a big battle, like at the end of, let's say, the Battle of Hogwarts would be the equivalent, I feel like Julie Soto had to give us so much world building information right at the beginning of the book that it felt like a big info dump and felt, you know, to be honest, a little confusing for me. And as someone who reads quite a bit of fantasy normally, that's always surprising when I encounter that. I feel like there were just a lot of different terms that were being thrown around. We also met like 50 people in the first few chapters of this book, like just a bunch of name drops and mentions that I feel like could have been introduced a lot more gradually. Like we kept meeting characters and having their names referenced when we probably didn't need to know their names yet at that point. But I will say, like, once I settled into it, I do feel like this was a fun read. I do overall love Julie Soto's writing style. In all of her books, I think her writing style just gets along really well with me and my brain. So very mixed opinions. I feel like overall the story did unravel kind of very slowly as well. There wasn't much happening. It's one of those books where most of the plot happens at the end, which I found also very strange. So this I think is going to be a trilogy, but it's based on like one fan fiction that was published, not published, but like it was posted as one book. So whenever that happens, I feel like splitting it up into 3 books doesn't really work. It just makes everything feel like it's moving so slow. But I will also say that this felt like it had potential to get better. So I am interested in continuing on in the story and seeing where everything goes. I did like parts of the romance here, kind of. Like there was definitely some good yearning, but at the same time, this book is a lot darker than my usual read, especially with romantic reads. This is quite dark romancy. So there were parts of that, you know, they're just not my thing. Dark romance just isn't my genre. I don't really like dark romance tropes for the most part. And this definitely leaned, you know, very heavily towards dark romance. But there was enough, I think, plot at the end of this book that just hooked me in again, like at the end. And I was like, well, like now I have to see where this goes. Mixed feelings on this one, but I will continue the series. And our 4th fantasy, I actually did continue my Brandon Sanderson journey this month. So I read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. This is one of his like standalone Cosmere books. And actually one of you sent me this. I think your name is pronounced Anissa? Is it Anissa or Anissa? But if you're watching this, thank you so much for sending this book to me. But I really enjoyed this one. I think this is definitely one of my top books from Brandon Sanderson. So far I have read the Mistborn trilogy and I've read Trust of the Emerald Sea. So this was my 5th book from him. But in this book, we follow Yumi and we follow the Nightmare Painter, obviously, from the title of this book. But our characters are very different. They're basically opposites and they also come from opposite worlds. So the Nightmare Painter, or he's called Painter for the majority of the book, he works as this sort of guard for this city and his world is very dark. It's night all the time. There's like a shroud of darkness covering his world. His environment is also very city-like. It's very futuristic, very like technology heavy. And so that is Painter. And then Yumi on the other side, she's kind of this like religious icon in this world. Like her world is very highly based on meditation, kind of peace, like they believe in spirits, and her world is very hot and sunny and there's a lot of gardens and plants everywhere. And so our two characters couldn't be farther apart. In a weird twist of events, and I'm not going to say too much about this because I don't want to give too much away about the plot of this book, but in a weird twist of events, Yumi and Painter become intertwined and they're sort of forced to spend this time together and get to know each other and overcome their differences to figure out what happened to them and figure out what to do next. And we have a lot of growth and self-realization as they go on this journey. I would say this is just a wonderful, cozy story. It feels, out of the Brandon Sandersons that I've read, this feels more like Tress, where we have more of a cozy fantasy vibe with a little bit more romance, but also, you know, there is a lot of plot going on. I would say overall I like this one more than Tress. The world we were in was very whimsy, very cozy, just like enchanting, like charming. And overall I think I enjoyed Brandon Sanderson's writing style in this book the most. I think for me, Tress read a little bit too middle grade for my personal preference, and this one definitely, it doesn't read like mature, but it reads a little bit older, and so I really liked that about this book. I do really love the characters in here. I love Yumi, I love the Painter, I love both of their like self-discovery journeys, and I was also really surprised at how this book folded in more political messaging that actually was really relevant to a lot of the things we're talking about today in terms of AI and machinery taking over like human jobs and kind of like machines and AI erasing and trying to replace art. There was a lot of talk about that in this book, so I actually found that to be really relevant to today, and I enjoyed a lot of that in this book. The one thing that I didn't absolutely love about this is that the narrator felt very present in this book, and on one hand, like I feel like I was enjoying it for most of the book, but there was one moment near the end of this book where things were kind of escalating. We were at our climax of the plot and things got confusing, you could say. Like there were a lot of big reveals and twists, and at that point, like, you know, me as the reader, my mind was kind of like, whoa, like what the heck is going on? There was a moment where the narrator in this book really had to like step in and literally said things like, you're probably very confused right now, let me explain what's going on. And then we had this entire chapter basically with the narrator explaining what had just happened for the past few chapters, and I didn't love that. It did take me out of the story because to me it felt like lazy a little bit. Like it felt like we were being told what happened versus being shown what happened and having the explanation come through being shown things. And I didn't love that. So that was one thing I didn't love near the end of this book. But overall, I really, really liked this. It's really encouraging me to pick up The Way of Kings finally. I feel like I just needed something, you know, cute and fun and small and standalone from Brandon Sanderson before getting into another gigantic series by him. So overall, I really like this one. I would say this is definitely like up there in my rankings of Brando Sando books. Okay, we're getting into our 3 romance reads. The first one we're going to talk about is Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. This is a book about Lenny, who at the beginning of the book is grieving the loss of her best friend. Her best friend did pass away recently, and she's kind of been living as a shadow of herself, sort of like barely going through the emotions, but not enjoying life whatsoever. But at the beginning of this book, she gets this babysitting job, and through that, she meets the kids uncle. His name is Miles, and he does seem to have this weirdly strained relationship with both the kid she's babysitting and the kid's mom, so like his sister. But as she continues to babysit there, he starts paying more attention to her, and as he notices that Lenny's not doing so well, he actually makes a deal with her. He's actually experienced a lot of grief in his life and kind of calls himself an expert in getting over grief. So he makes this deal with Lenny saying he'll help her get over her grief if she helps him repair his strained relationship with his sister and his niece. So they start hanging out with each other, kind of getting to know each other and trying to help each other out in their current situations. I enjoyed this one. I will say from Cara Bastone, I liked Ready or Not more, but I did still enjoy this one. I think what I love about her books most is that, first of all, her writing style really works with my brain. It feels so smooth and natural to me that it doesn't feel like I'm reading a book when I'm reading her books. It feels like someone's just telling me a story. I also really love her books because she's so good at establishing the emotional side of a romantic relationship over the physical. There is really like not much physical that happens in her books until we fully establish that like mental connection, that bond between our characters, and I love that. She tends to do friends to lovers, which in this sea of enemies to lovers out there, I think is really refreshing and nice to read. She also writes the most like wholesome, wonderful, non-toxic love interests, so I love her MMCs as well. If you're looking for like a steamy, spicy romance, you will likely not love these books, but if you're looking for something more wholesome, just something that feels really good and makes you happy and gives you like warm and fuzzy feelings inside, I would totally recommend her books. I think there was just really like one thing in this book that I didn't love so much, or maybe a few things. One of them was that our main character did this weirdly annoying thing where every male character she met, she would in her head envision this like entire future with him, kind of as a joke, but like it just happened way too frequently and I got really annoyed at it. Like she would just see, I don't know, the guy that works at the coffee shop and she'd be like, oh yeah, in this like dream romantic universe, he would get my order wrong and then he would apologize and give me a new one, and then we would like touch hands as he passed the coffee cup over the counter, and we would fall in love and live out our lives and move into this apartment together and have 2 kids. And like she would just like envision this entire future and we would get the entire thing explained to us every single time, and that really made me annoyed. Also, I feel like the beginning of this book was slightly not believable, just like how quickly our 2 main characters got into this like deal with each other. So there were a few things that weren't perfect for me about this book, but overall, yeah, just like a very wholesome romance. Okay, I did read Daisy Haites and the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. I was pleasantly surprised at this book. It's definitely my favorite so far in this series. I do also just quickly want to mention, just because I know this has been a hot topic online, I personally do not fully align with Jessa Hastings' views on AI. Do with that what you will. Look it up for more information if you want to, but yeah, there are just certain things I don't agree with Jessa Hastings. But in terms of this book, I will say, yeah, I did enjoy it. It's definitely my favorite book from her so far. I said this in my reading vlog where I read this, but I feel like Jessa Hastings does the miscommunication trope very well, which is high praise coming from me because that is definitely my least favorite trope of all time. And so the fact that her books really heavily revolve around miscommunication, but I somehow, you know, can get through her books and end up enjoying her books, you know, it says a lot. So that's great. I think the miscommunication works in her books because we get this deep insight into her characters' minds. Like her writing style really feels like the inner ramblings of a character. You get that internal dialogue. And so that makes the communication just feel more in tune and a lot like you understand the miscommunication more because you see deeper into her characters' minds. I just feel really attached to this side of the Magnolia Parks world, like the Daisy Haites, the Julian Haites, the Christian Hems, all of the like lost boys they call themselves. I really like in these books. I also enjoy these books for like the crime aspect as well. I feel like it adds this air of danger and excitement that we don't really get on the Magnolia side. I do talk more about this book in the reading vlog where I read it. It was my continuing series video for June, so watch that video if you want to hear more thoughts on this one. But yeah, Daisy Haites and the Great Undoing. I'm just gonna leave it there. I will continue the series because I already have Into the Dark, so I will read that and finish it off in July. But yeah, My feelings on Jessa Hastings overall right now are a little bit conflicted, so I unfortunately don't want to dwell too long on this one, which is a shame because I did really enjoy this book. And the third romance I read was actually Can't Get Enough by Kennedy Ryan. This is the third book in an interconnected romance series, and in this one we follow Hendrix. She is a very career-focused woman. She is highly successful. She spends, you know, basically all of her time working at her job. She has multiple businesses. She's just like a girl boss. Like, she's awesome, and she's always been happy to be single. She is like the epitome of single and thriving and just living for herself. But at the beginning of this book, she meets Maverick Bell, who is this tech mogul, like billionaire, and they just connect immediately. And she's truly never felt this way about any other guy before, so she is kind of conflicted. Also, getting to know him more would cause a rift in her professional and personal life, so she's kind of like, nope, forbidden, he's off limits, I can't go there. But the two of them just keep getting intertwined, they keep running into each other, they keep, you know, they're kind of mingled in business as well. First of all, I will say I do always appreciate Kennedy Ryan on how she incorporates all of these real world elements into her books that feel very realistic. She always like raises awareness about things in her book. So in the second book in the series, she was raising awareness about autism. There's a lot of autism rep, which I personally think was done well, and I've looked at other people's thoughts and reviews, and overall the consensus is that she represented autism very realistically, very well, very respectfully. And in this one we have Alzheimer's representation, and I personally think it was done very well as well. And the way it's incorporated into the story is that Hendrix has a mother who is currently going through, you know, the stages of Alzheimer's, and we see her journey as she starts coming into her role as more of a caregiver to her mother. I do also love the way Kennedy Ryan writes adult characters. Her romances genuinely feel like adult romances, which is something that to me is difficult to achieve because I haven't seen a lot of authors do it very well. There was also some good banter in this that I liked, and overall I liked the plot and the direction we went in. But I will say, out of like the 3 books that I've read from her, there's always something missing in her romances that I don't feel connected to. I don't feel the chemistry overall. I don't feel the development of the romance. I think in this one specifically, we had a romance that was trying to disguise itself as a slow burn, but it was an insta love. A dragged out insta love where we knew it was insta love, but it was just pretending. It was pretending to be a slow burn, and I don't love that. Like, if you're gonna do a slow burn, make it a true slow burn. It was just so instant connection, instant love, instant lust, instant physical, instant everything. But we kind of dragged on this idea of like, no, I can't have him. We can't go to that next stage. But everything was happening so quickly, but also so slow at the same time. I don't know, it's hard to describe. There was also like just more spice than I normally prefer, but I know that's personal preference. But yeah, her books do have a lot of spice in them. And I feel like the type of spice in particular is also very vulgar. Like, the way she writes spice is very specific, very like vulgar, very like, you know, you follow the actions, you know, step-by-step instructions on what they're doing, and that's just not the type of spice that I enjoy reading. Her characters also in this book were very vulgar with the things they were saying too. Like, there was a lot of just vulgar dialogue that is not my personal preference. Like, go them for being, you know, so open about things, but it's just not something that I get along with personally. And also, oh yeah, there were kind of like 3 parallel storylines going on here. So we had like the business side of things, like her work life. We had her personal side of things, so with her family and her mom and Alzheimer's, and we had the romance. And I just feel like the 3 plots, they didn't feel connected. Like, it really felt to me like 3 plots running side by side. I feel like everything felt so disjointed. There were things that I loved about this book and things that I didn't love about this book, but I would still recommend it, I think. Okay, going into our literary fictions, I read 2 Frederick Bachmans this month, which, like, what the heck was I thinking? I had a lot of breakdowns this month with some sad books that I read that are coming up. So the first one was The Winners. This is the 3rd book in the Beartown trilogy. I don't think I need to tell you the synopsis again because I've talked about this trilogy so much in the past few months. But immediately from the beginning, like from the opening chapter of this book, I was like, oh no, like I just felt this feeling of dread. I was like, I know this book is gonna break me. From the very first line, from the very first paragraph, I was like, what are you gonna do to me, Frederick Bachman? What are you gonna do? And yeah, he broke me at the end of this book. There was, after spending so much time with these characters, you just feel so attached to them, and at the end of this book, I was not okay, but like in the best way, like in the way where you're like, wow, I got so immersed and like pulled into this book and this world and these characters that like I felt these such deep emotions, and I love that feeling. But anyways, how does this compare to his other books? I found this book to be very politics heavy, very, very politics heavy. And at some points of the book, to be honest, I was like, where are we going with all of this? Why are we dealing with all of these like in-town politics? But you know, this series overall is a very political series. It's very emotional, but it's also heavily political, and we get really deep into that in this third book, which makes sense because we need everything to like come around. And so while there were moments in this book where I was like, why is there so much politics? It was all needed. It was all necessary in there to get like the full impact of this book and like of all the events that were happening. So yeah, while this book I feel like on one hand was a little bit of work to get through, it was good work, and it was, you know, you get the payoff from it. And so because of that, I can't fault the book for making me work hard in my reading. I feel like I have not much to say about this book because I've been kind of going through this journey with you as I've been going through the trilogy. So I feel like I've already said all there is to be said. I highly recommend this trilogy. It is very dark. It is very sad. So just definitely make sure you're emotionally prepared to go into it. But it's wonderful. His writing is absolutely incredible. You will get to know these characters so deep down, and yeah, I would highly recommend this trilogy. And I also read his new release, so I read My Friends. This one definitely had a lighter tone to it, okay? So I would say out of his books, I've read 5 of them so far, the Beartown trilogy is his dark, serious trilogy, but A Man Called Ove and also My Friends takes a little bit more of a quirky, lighthearted tone. Like it's not shallow. There are definitely like sad things that happen, and all of his books, other than the first Beartown book, have made me cry. So there are serious, sad themes in every single one of his books, but in something like My Friends, he mixes it in with his like quirky sense of humor. I love that about his writing. I actually recently also, kind of off topic, but I followed him on Instagram recently, and his Instagram posts are so funny. Like the captions that he writes are so like, you can see that he wrote these books by reading the captions he writes on his Instagrams. Like they're just so quirky. He has this very particular sense of humor that I just love. It's just so nonsensical, but it also makes so much sense at the same time. I would highly recommend you follow him on Instagram and take a look at his Instagram posts if you like his writing, because they're just so entertaining. But anyways, yeah, he does have this just quirky sense of humor that is so fun to read about. And while I was reading My Friends, I would read one sentence and laugh out loud, and the next sentence would make me cry. Like I loved this book so much for taking you on that emotional roller coaster. I would say like Beartown and that trilogy just makes you feel sad basically the entire way through, okay? I'm not gonna lie. But if you want something that's like not just all sad, but like something that will lift your spirits up and then crush them, and then lift them again and crush them again, but at the end of the book you feel overall positive, I would recommend something like My Friends or A Man Called Ove. But that being said, what is this book about? We follow Louisa, who has just turned 18. She has lived her entire life in foster care, so this is like a big moment for her. She's jumped from foster family to foster family, and they haven't all been positive experiences for her. She is also sort of struggling with this friendship loss, so she's feeling all of these feelings of grief. But at the beginning of the book, she actually visits this art gallery where her favorite painting of all time is being displayed. And she's always just lived with this postcard version of this painting, and she stares at it every day. She's memorized it. She has the opportunity to see this painting in person for the first time. So she breaks into this art gallery. I'm not going to say more about her story, because I want Frederick Bachman to tell you the story, but that's the setup for her plot. And then we have this dual timeline situation where we jump back to when the painting was painted, and we see the story of the artist of the painting and his group of friends and how he grew up and just how this painting came to be. And you need to read this book, okay? You need to read this book. It is so good. I would say this is my favorite Frederick Bachman, which is high praise because I've given every single one of his books a 5-star. But this book also starts out with a Ratatouille quote. Immediately I was sold. old. This book just does it all, you know? You feel all the emotions with it. I love the dual timeline and how everything connected so well. Like the parallels between the dual timelines, they worked perfectly. This book was also just filled with all of these lines that just hit you deep into your soul. We have unlikely friendships in this one. I just think this was like the most perfectly well-rounded book. I was crying within the first 50 pages of this book. I cried twice by page 50. But at the same time, as I mentioned, like this book just makes you feel so good at the same time. Okay, next up we have The Summer We Ran by Audrey Ingram. This is another literary fiction. I would say it's like a literary romance, actually. We follow Tess. Tess is 17. She lives with just her mom, and they kind of move around a lot because her mom works as a cook. So her mom gets this job as this personal chef slash housekeeper for this really rich woman and her summer home. So they both move there, and Tess meets her new neighbor Grant, who lives next door, and they have this whirlwind teenage romance until tragedy strikes, and you know, some mysterious incident tears them apart, and they break up. They never see each other again. They never talk to each other again. There's no contact until 25 years later when they're both running for governor of Virginia. So they end up on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and the first time they like talk to each other again is like at a debate for this campaign. So we get another dual timeline situation where we see their romance from the past and then how they are dealing with each other now. First of all, I will say the first half of this book was super bingeable to read. I actually did really enjoy the first half. It left me with a lot of mystery. There were a lot of things you had to sort of guess at the beginning of the book, and I found that to be just like a good combination of a bingeable read. Like, first of all, easy to read writing style. Second of all, a mystery to solve. Third of all, a whirlwind romance, just like a lot of the ingredients you need for a recipe for a highly bingeable story. However, I will say the first half of this book was the good half of this book for me. Unfortunately, it just fell apart in the second half. The second half got really political. And you know, you can't expect that in a book where we're revolving around an election, a campaign. Obviously, things are going to go political, but I just feel like in this book in particular, it could have been done so much better. Like, there was no nuance to the way the politics were being smashed into this book. Like, it was very in your face. It just didn't feel nuanced. It didn't feel like it was interwoven in a very delicate manner whatsoever. It was just like, here you go. Like, I gave you romance in the first half, now here's politics. And it was just very like two-dimensional. You couldn't see the depth behind the politics. It was just very surface level. I get the messaging that Audrey Ingram was trying to tell in this book, and I understand, you know, I totally get it, but like, I just feel like it could have done so much better. The characters also ended up feeling very two-dimensional. In the past timeline, we do get a very YA, very young feeling from the point of view, obviously because we're reading from the point of view of a 17-year-old, but it makes sense. But I found that in our adult point of view, we didn't get much growth. Like, it kind of felt like we were still dealing with teenagers in the adult timeline. Everything just like, it continued to feel very young, very teenager, very two-dimensional. We didn't see growth of the characters whatsoever throughout this book. I also think both of the main characters in this book were very highly unlikable characters, and you know, in books that's okay. As I've been reading more and more, I've realized like you don't really need to love characters in books to enjoy a book. Sometimes a book is really good because you're not supposed to like the main characters. You know, that's the point, and it's telling you a story about these unlikable people. But just from the direction this book went in, it's very clear that you're supposed to like these characters and you're supposed to be rooting for them, and I just didn't like them. And so for the book to end in the way it did, it gave me zero satisfaction. I didn't love this. Miscommunication was also so strong in this book, or I would say lack of communication. I wouldn't even say miscommunication. There was just no communication at all. I thought this book had promise at the beginning, but unfortunately, it just really fell flat for me. Overall, didn't love this. Okay, I did love this next book though. I really, really loved it. So I read Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck, and this was really me reaching out. This definitely was unlike any other book I've read before, but this one is a magical realism literary fiction, like a very character-driven character-driven magical realism book. We follow newlywed. So this couple has just gotten married at the beginning of the book, but the husband starts turning into a shark. And to me, this sounds like a bizarre concept. It was kind of bizarre getting into this book because the way it happens is our husband character, like first of all, it's like his skin that starts changing, and then his like teeth start feeling weird, or his bones, and it's like a very slow literal mutation into a literal great white shark. And at the beginning of the book, the way he finds out is he goes to the doctor, and the doctors just tell him like, yeah, you're turning into a shark, as if it's just like this really normal thing. But like outside of this like shark mutation thing, the world is very real world, just the world we live in, but in this parallel universe that Emily Haybeck has created, it's become somewhat of a normal thing for certain humans to mutate into animals. So there are some humans that mutate into birds, there are some animals that turn into frogs, and then our husband character in here, I can't recall his name right now actually. I'm just gonna keep calling him husband, but he does have a name. He gets diagnosed with shark mutation. And in this world, instead of like trying to find a cure, like the doctor's goals are just to make his mutation as comfortable as it can be, because there are certain things that happen along the way that like can be painful or uncomfortable, or like at a certain point he starts losing his mind and his like feral side of being a shark starts taking over, and he starts blacking out and starts embracing his feral shark predator mind. So the doctors just try and ease him into that, and just basically, you know, they tell Ren, the wife, they just tell her like, yeah, he has this many months, this is probably the range of time when he will like become fully a shark, and that's the time you have to release him into the ocean. Like there's no stopping this. There's no, like, you're gonna lose your husband, he's gonna turn into a shark, but you can make him comfortable for like the 6 to 8 months that this happens, and then yeah, you'll just have to let him be a shark. So yeah, this book was just so interesting, but I will say I loved it. I thoroughly loved it. I think Emily Haybeck's writing in this was so gorgeous. It was so beautiful. It was almost like reading poetry. And I'm not really a poetry reader, but there was just something so lovely and poetic about her writing. But at the same time, like, we were telling a story. The formatting in this book was also really interesting. We had some chapters that felt like real chapters, like normal chapters of fiction books. We had some chapters that read more like a screenplay, and then we had some chapters that were one sentence, and we had some chapters that were one paragraph. Like, it felt really like a collection of rambling thoughts, but in the best way possible. But at the same time, we still had this cohesive story that was being told. It was just done so well. I'm so amazed at how Emily Haybeck put together this story. There were also just like, you know, there were a lot of ups and downs. This story focused a lot on the character aspect of like what it's like to turn into a shark, or like what it's like when you can see your husband, like someone you love, turning into an animal. And we really dove deep into the psychology of that. I loved it. I loved it so much. It also, I feel like all of it was kind of a metaphor, like a parallel to just like the struggles you can face as a newlywed couple, but it manifested into this physical form of like your husband turning into a shark. It's something that, you know, I'm probably not doing this book justice because Emily Haybeck is much better at telling a story. So I just think you need to read this book. It's so good. It's so wonderful. I loved it so much. It was definitely out of my usual zone, but in this case, it paid off. Okay, we have Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, another book that made me absolutely have a breakdown. I think this is the hardest I've cried in a book. Are you okay? I would put this in a historical fiction category with a subplot of romance. We are set in the 80s, and we follow Joan, who absolutely loves space. At the beginning of the book, she's working as a professor, but NASA announces that they are recruiting for their new space shuttle program and hiring women for the first time. So Joan obviously jumps at this opportunity. She gets in, and we go through her journey in the space shuttle program as she learns more about space, her love of space, but also learns about love in all forms. So she starts making friends. There is a romantic love story in here. We also explore like love for family as well. I read this in my 24-hour readathon, so you can watch me have a breakdown in that video and also just like expand more on this book. But the way the story was told was incredible, because again, we do have a dual timeline in here. This was the month of dual timelines, I think, but we have Joan in the 80s. That's obviously one of our timelines. And then we have a more present day timeline where we are on an active space mission, and the current day timeline had this like anxiety inducing, fast paced, just like stressful situation of a timeline, where our previous timeline was slower, more character driven. We spent time getting to know everyone and establishing our relationships with everyone. So the dynamic between switching back and forth between this really high stress story versus the slower moving character driven story, I found worked super, super well. I also really just loved Joan's story and her experience through the space shuttle program and how it wasn't perfect, and even like at the point where she thought she had achieved everything she wanted to achieve, like it wasn't the perfect experience. Like, you know, she still felt rewarded, and she still, you know, it's an amazing accomplishment, everything she achieved, but the fact that nothing was ever perfect, like that perfect dream moment felt so realistic. I just think this is a book everyone needs to read. Like, it is so relevant to today. I feel like most people could find something in this book that they could latch onto and love and feel connected to. The entire story consumed me. We explore love literally in all forms in this book, and this book is only like 330 pages, but every single sentence, every single word had intention in this book, and it's definitely one of my top reads of the year, by far. Ooh, and we dove really, really, really far out of my comfort zone with this one. I read Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi, and as a fantasy reader, I have not really dove that deep into sci-fi. I think the only sci-fi I read last year was The Ministry of Time, and I haven't really been like a lover of sci-fi, but I loved The Ministry of Time last year, so I just thought, why not try and read more sci-fi? So I picked up Recursion, and I'm kind of convinced that I'm a sci-fi girly now because I loved this one a lot. I really, really enjoyed it. This one's kind of like a sci-fi mystery thriller. We follow Barry, who is a cop in New York City, and at the beginning of the book, he gets into an investigation, and he starts looking into this strange phenomenon that's been happening called the false memory syndrome, where people are, you know, living their regular lives, but then all of a sudden they get a nosebleed, their head hurts, and then all of a sudden they get all of these memories of an entire lifetime flooding into their minds of like an entire parallel life. So, you know, you could be someone who lives in a condo with a partner, but maybe you want to get a divorce and you don't like your partner. This is a made up situation. It's not actually in the book, but an example. Let's say that person's living that life, but one day they get all these memories of an entire alternate life where maybe they're married to someone that they love. They have their dream job. They're living in a different house. They maybe have kids in this alternate life. It's all in their heads, but it feels so detailed that it feels like they actually lived that life. But in their real life, none of that happened. And then they got all these like repercussions from it. Maybe they really loved these kids that they had in their alternate life that only exists in their brain, but now they feel really depressed because those kids don't exist in their real life. And we get really deep into this like mental impact of that happening. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. That is Barry's plot. And then on the other hand, we have another timeline where we are following Helena, who is a neuroscientist, and she is currently working on trying to restore memories because she has a mother who is suffering from Alzheimer's. Oh, we've had an Alzheimer's theme this month as well. Her mother is suffering from Alzheimer's. She is starting to forget certain things, and so Helena wants to invent this machine that will help restore memories and that will help people remember things. And so Helena and Barry, their stories get intertwined, and I really don't want to say more because I don't want to give anything away about this book because it is absolute madness. Sage wants out, one sec. The depth we go into in this book of not only the mind, but also the idea of time and space is just incredible. And also, this is another book that is not that long but packs so much in so few pages. It's also, I think, somewhere around 300 pages, like just over 300 pages long, but there's so much in this book, and it's such an ambitious, complex plot and world and idea that I don't know how Blake Crouch fit all of that into so few pages, but it is just so impressive. This book overall, I would say, is like, think of something like Inception, but like 10,000 times more intense. We play on the ideas of deja vu and the Mandela effect, but like make that so extreme. I think this is definitely one of the coolest concepts I've read about in a long time. It also had the potential to break my brain, but I feel like Blake Crouch had such an approachable, easy to understand way of telling the story and explaining what was going on that like there was no point in time in this book where I felt so confused and like overwhelmed by what was going on, which was really great because I feel like with sci-fi in in general, I do tend to feel a little bit overwhelmed because it's not something that I normally read. So I'm not really familiar with a lot of sci-fi concepts. My brain just doesn't work that way, but I feel like Blake Crouch just made it so approachable. I was a little intimidated to jump into a concept like this, but he leads you through it so well. So I really appreciated that. The ending of this book got me so stressed, okay? It got me feeling so claustrophobic and just anxious and just like feeling like the world was going to end and like wondering how we were going to get out of this situation. It's definitely a really highly intense ending of a book, but I loved it. I loved it so much. I think the one thing that prevented this book from being a full 5-star for me was there was a little bit of a romance in this book. It's not a romance book. It is for sure a sci-fi book. There was a little subplot of romance, and for me, I didn't see it coming, but in a bad way, kind of like in the way where I was like, what? Did I miss a few chapters here? Like, when did this romance happen? That was a little jarring for me, and like, I don't know if it's just like I missed something, but I just didn't understand how the romantic characters were all of a sudden romantic with each other. Like, the connection did not make sense to me, so that took me out of it a little bit, but outside of that, wonderful read. Loved this book. And we are on our last read of the month, and this was our mystery read. So I read The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a highly popular YA mystery romance series, and so this is the third book. And the first book, or the series, is called The Inheritance Games, just in case you didn't know. But the first book, The Inheritance Games, follows Avery, who is a high school student. A very rich, like multi-billionaire, passes away, and for some reason gives his entire inheritance, passes it along to Avery. And Avery's like, what the heck? I had no idea who this billionaire was. We have never communicated or known each other in my entire life. So like, why did he give me his entire inheritance and fortune? So she goes to like claim her inheritance. She moves into the Hawthorne Manor, which is her new home, and she meets his entire family. So he has these 4 grandsons who are all like super good looking guys, and just tries to acclimate to her new life. But then all these mysteries come up, you know, like, why did he leave her his fortune? It seems to be very random, but then these clues start coming up that, you know, maybe it wasn't so random. The old billionaire also loved puzzles and riddles, so he's like leaving all of these clues and hints and puzzles and riddles everywhere. And Avery, along with the 4 brothers, who are very familiar with their grandfather's puzzles, kind of work together to figure out what is going on. And then throughout the series, we just get like more mysteries and more puzzles to figure out. I really enjoyed the first book, The Inheritance Games. I thought it was really fun. It was fast paced. It was like just a good read that was easy on your brain. But I honestly feel like as I continue to read on the series, I'm getting so bored. I don't know if I'm just growing out of it. Like, I read The Inheritance Games last summer, so it wasn't even that long, but I feel like maybe even in the past year, my reading taste has changed a little bit, and I just feel like this isn't scratching that itch that it used to. Like, I enjoyed the first book. It wasn't perfect. I think I gave it like a 3.5. It wasn't like, whoa, like amazing, but I liked it enough to like buy the rest of the series. When I read the second book, I liked it, but not as much as the first book. And then when I read this one, this was my least favorite of them all. I found myself overwhelmingly bored with this one. It just felt a lot of like the same thing. Like, obviously we're getting different puzzles, we're getting different mysteries to solve, but we're following the same characters. We're in the same environment. We're literally in the same house for the entire series, and I'm just getting bored. It just seems to be like repetition of the same thing, but in a slightly different form to me, and I just want something fresh. It would be fun to like go somewhere else, and there is a reason why we are stuck in the same place, and it makes sense with the context of the book, but I just find that situation to be very boring to read over the span of 3 books. I think it feels like Jennifer Lynn Barnes is just like throwing in more things to figure out just for the sake of having more things to figure out. Like, things have lost meaning. We've lost the plot, and I feel no connection. That being said, I did, this was probably a mistake of mine, but I did go on like a book outlet binge, like shopping spree last year, which I probably shouldn't have, but I did purchase the entire rest of the series, which, is only 1 more book after this one, but then there is a spin-off series, which I have already purchased the first book of. So I have 2 more books that I physically own in this world that I now own but really don't want to read because I felt so bored and discouraged by this one. So I did actually post an Instagram poll asking you guys, for those of you who have read this series, if it's worth it to continue or if it just kind of like keeps doing more of the same thing. And an overwhelming amount of you voted for me to not continue the series, which is where, you know, obviously I posted the poll, so that's the direction I was leaning in. So at this moment in time, I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I think I'm going to DNF the rest of the series just because life's too short. You know, I have so many books that I have and I want to read that like I just don't want to be spending time on books that I feel so discouraged by and like really don't want to continue with. So at this moment in time, I'm so sorry to those of you who really love the series. I think I'm going to drop the series for now and call it a DNF. I am going to keep the books that I physically own so far for now. I'm going to keep them. I'm going to move them off my TBR cart, so I'm not going to count them in my TBR, but I'm going to keep them for now just in case, you know, in the future, maybe I feel the inclination to come back to these. So there is hope. There is some hope for me, but yeah, for now, I think I'm going to remove it from my immediate TBR and just call it a day. But that being said, those are the 14 books I read in July. Oh my God, why do I keep saying July? It's June. Those are the 14 books I read in June. And so now we have the fun task of getting these books onto my shelves. So there we have it. I'm gonna leave you guys here for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, let me know what books you read in June. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!